Hey YouTube, welcome back to another video. This video is going to be like the one we did after the first week of the NFL preseason. We're just going to get caught up on everything that's happening. Talk about a few guys who performed well, who didn't, some suspension stuff, things like that. Of course, injuries. We always talk about this is the most important time of year to make sure that you are 100% caught up on everything from around the NFL. Draft season comes right about now, and you got to know everything. And so that's what this video is for, just to gather all these different types of information and then just boom, give it to you in one video so that's easier for you guys to find. But here you go. Let's get caught up on week 2 of the NFL preseason. Before we do that, I want to talk about a few things. One, if you haven't had your draft yet, make sure to click the link in the description below. If you're looking for a draft board, we offer some really great draft boards. We get a portion of the money, a small portion, but really it's mostly there because we honestly completely think that it's the best draft board out there. We love it. It's fantastic. So that's always an option to you. Again, these videos are great, but if you want posts daily, follow us on Instagram and on Twitter. We're posting just random stats, pieces of information that don't make it into the videos, injury updates, suspension news, things like that. As soon as we hear it, boom, we're posting it. We also love to interact with you guys on there. It's just a lot of fun, a lot of things going on every single day. So make sure to do that. And if you're looking for complete rankings and full information on every guy that has fantasy value, just go to our website. It's there's a link in the description below, and you can just see all that for every position, stats from last year, and all our full complete notes on everyone. So make sure to do that as well. But that's really all I got to say before we get right into it. Let's just start with NFL news. What's happening?
So NFL news. Okay, we're going to talk about NFL news. Probably for me, the biggest news out there is Josh Gordon is back with the team. After all this talk, nobody really knew for certain. Even the Browns were kind of in the dark. He returned to the team, and I don't know how to interpret that. I'll tell you what we do know for sure. This was put out there by the NFL at this point. The league is cleared. The league has not cleared Gordon to practice. Now he was at practice today. He was on the side doing some work, stuff like that, but he hasn't been approved at this point to actually participate with the team. How do you interpret this? Before we get into some more information, that's been hard for me. I've got him in a keeper league. I love this guy. I think his talent is out of this world, yet he's got a big issue. And his biggest issue is he has a hard time keeping clean. He's got a lot of issues going on there. Seems like he's still struggling with some mental health issues. And so what do? I've got him in a keeper league, and I had to decide by today who I was going to keep, and ultimately I kept him. And but once again, this whole thing is kind of an enigma to try to figure out there. Anything you guys have heard about Josh Gordon? What's your take on this situation? He's back with the team. Can we trust? What's going on?
Well, that's the funny thing. First of all, I want to say, like, I'm so tired of talking about Josh Gordon. But don't let that be a reason for you to just entirely stay away from him. There comes a point where maybe it's the 9th round and you should take him or whatever. But keep following the news. Yeah, it gets tiring. Yeah, it gets boring. It was really funny because I thought I heard something from somebody about, okay, maybe Josh Gordon's back or whatever. So I just Googled. I was like, Josh Gordon news. Boom, Google it. First 2 things that popped up. First one was Josh Gordon's back with the team. He's going to practice. Second one was Josh Gordon could serve 30 days for not paying his child support. Like, really interesting. There's always just so much news surrounding this guy. First of all, I think it's good news. We talked about that he looked at possibly going a month in jail for not paying his child support. Well, because he wasn't practicing, he wasn't playing, he wasn't getting a check from the NFL. Now that he's back, he should get that check. He shouldn't go to jail. He'll just pay it. He'll be fine. I don't think that's a concern. I think that this week for news as far as Josh Gordon has been positive. Now that he's back with the team, the NFL will clear him. And to be honest, as fantasy owners, we are kind of like the Cleveland Browns in this situation. We don't want to put up with him, but he's so talented you can't ignore him. And so that's kind of what this is for me. I just sick and tired of him, but you can't not look at him as a possible guy because he could be a top-tier NFL wide receiver.
Yeah, I let some good guys go. I actually let Jordan Howard go. And like Jordan Howard on the keeper league, but here's why I went that route. Josh Gordon has got such a high ceiling with so much potential. And like we always say, if you want to win your league, you got to take chances. So he is back with the team. Hasn't been approved by the NFL to practice yet, but he's there. So any takes on Josh Gordon, Ryan?
I'm with you, Christian. I'm really tired of this whole Josh Gordon issue. I mean, on a personal level, Josh Gordon, I don't know him as a guy, of course, but I wish he does well in his life. On a professional level, I think he's just ruining the team. He's causing a distraction constantly. You never know if he's going to be there, if he's not going to be there. I mean, we'll talk about this later, but I mean, they were on the verge of signing another player because he potentially could not be playing for the season. And that's just a distraction that you don't want to have. And like you said, it's one of those things where you don't want to deal with it, but the talent is undeniable. So personally, I think he does. I hope he does well with his rehab, and I hope he sticks with it. But professionally, I just don't really want anything to do with him until I know. And who knows? He could go 30, 60, 90 days on the field, and then all of a sudden have a slip, and then he's done for the rest of his career. So it's just too much of a risk for me to have to deal with Josh Gordon on my fantasy team.
Yeah, we did a video where we talked about sell high. He might be a guy for me that if he does well the first 30 days, I get scared and trade him while he's hot. I will say this, I hate drama, I hate distractions from the team, but you know what's more distracting than what he does off the field? And why I think maybe they should put up with him a little bit? You know what's very distracting? Going 0-16 as a team. That's very distracting.
He's not the problem on that team. The problem is that team has no talent, and he's the only talent.
The organization's a mess.
Well, it's the organization. I mean, like I mentioned in our last week's video, that I've been watching the Hard Knocks, and honestly, I don't know. Maybe this was just something that they set up with HBO to cause drama, to make that show more popular, to get ratings. But I mean, I know we've all talked about Josh Gordon. He's got the talent. Maybe he doesn't need to work out. Maybe I just don't see an NFL team having the idea that we're going to have this show and we're going to go and we're going to let this guy not practice with our team for so long just for a storyline. So I do believe that it is one of his mental health issues, one of his physical health issues. But I honestly, a small part of me just feels like it could be a storyline for ratings.
Well, there goes Ryan with the conspiracy theories. Now we're getting all the crazies going to come out in the comments below.
So.
But unless you guys have anything to say, there's our weekly Josh Gordon life
There we
update.
go.
Yep,
What
back.
about other news from around the NFL?
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of news. I'll let you guys chime in. I think about LaShawn McCoy. We've been following him. What's going to happen with him? Right now, there's really no news there. I think about Des Bryant. He speaking of the Browns, he met with the Browns this week. He didn't come away with the contract. I don't know if that's an indication that he's not worth signing, why teams are staying away from him, or if it's the Browns. Nothing new there. What other news are you guys hearing out there? And we will actually at one point get to talking about the new helmet rule. But let's wait to get to that.
Yeah, we'll make that probably the last news. But Ryan, any other news you heard from around the league you want to talk about?
Just a couple quick things. One thing I had on Martavis Bryant, it sounds like he's having a tough time picking up the offense and the playbook there with John Gruden and the offense that they have out there now in Oakland. And one thing I wanted to talk about, we've mentioned this name a lot, is Chris Godwin. I don't recall the beat reporter, but the Tampa Bay Times reporter came out and said that looks like Chris Godwin is going to be the number 2 wide receiver for Tampa Bay this year. And I was just wondering what kind of thoughts you guys have on him moving up. I know in a previous video I mentioned that Deshaun Jackson's role might be reduced a little bit. Some of those targets might be coming away, and now it looks like it's coming to fruition. So how do you guys feel about Chris Godwin with this situation?
Well, yeah, that's obviously huge. Let's get a little bit excited about that. Of course, don't overreach, but yeah, that definitely adds value to him. The quarterback situation is still a mess, and there are still a lot of different options there, from Cameron Brate as well, of course, Mike Evans, and so I guess it all depends on, is he going to fall far enough for me to take a shot on him? But I definitely like him. I think that's great news. He was a guy who had some value last year. I wonder how much that's going to increase this year. What do you think, Rob?
Yeah, there's a lot of positive talk about the guy. In fact, we did a sleeper video that we say is one of our sleepers out there. We like this guy. Now, once again, it is preseason last night, but when he was on the field last night with Winston, he did get a touchdown. Everything's trending upwards for this guy. And what it comes down to, everybody out there has value. It comes down to where you're getting him. I like Chris Godwin actually quite a bit, depending upon where you get him in the draft. So I definitely think right now, everything we said in the sleeper video was pointing him to be the number 2 guy. His time on the field, his first team reps, everything would seem to indicate at this point he's going to be the number 2 guy in an offense that's probably going to have to score a lot of points to win games this year.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. I felt like this was honestly kind of a bit of maybe a boring week. Like there wasn't quite as much happen. So one thing I'd say is I'm looking forward to next week. Week 3 of the NFL season, or the NFL preseason, is where things start to heat up. Starters, the guys who we're really looking into as fantasy values, they play the most time in any preseason game, week 3. That means we're going to see a lot of time from them. We're going to see a lot of battles kind of shake out, coaches deciding who's getting how much playing time, as well as more playing time means more injuries. That means we're going to be 1 week closer to the NFL season. That means things get shaken out. Like eventually this Josh Gordon thing is just going to be settled and something's going to happen. He's either going to be playing or he's not. And so we'll look forward to that next week. But yeah, this was maybe a slow week. Anything else? I don't have anything that I want to mention, to be honest. I just don't.
Well, Ryan, you brought up the idea, like, what do you think about the new helmet rule in the NFL? First of all, it's confusing. The players don't know what it means, so I'm certainly not going to try to define it for you. The whole process is confusing, but who really cares? Because we're talking about fantasy football. Would that have an effect? I'll tell you what I think effect it will have in fantasy football. You guys tell me what your thoughts are out there. Obviously, the players hate it, but I think it's going to increase offense and scoring.
Yeah, well, that's the question people are asking. Is this going to decrease offensive yards or increase offensive yards? Is this going to help the defense or help the offense? And so why do you think this is going to help the offense?
Well, two ways I think it's going to help the offense. One, I think for a defensive player who's so worried about hitting hard, leading with a helmet, things like that, it gets confusing. That leads to more arm tackles, which are easier for wide receivers, running backs to break. You know, it's almost like becoming a flag football league. And so I think that's going to benefit the offense. I also think that guys with this new rule got a lot more penalties that are going to sustain drives to keep the ball going. A prime example is last night in the Vikings game. I know Twitter blew up and they were appalled. There was a sack there. We saw this. I couldn't believe it. It was a legitimate sack. The guy didn't lead with his head. He didn't pick him up. He didn't slam him. It was clean, and he got a flag that kept that drive going. So I think the rule is very confusing. If anything, I see it benefiting offensive numbers in the NFL.
I think it definitely helps the offenses as far as scoring, but now some of these things I've heard from the defenders. How are you gonna? There's such a small window where you can hit people. How are you gonna hit somebody with your shoulder pads and try and wrap them up without hitting them with the top of your helmet? Now it's hard when you have so many referees and so many line judges and so many other things to get everybody on the same page with such a rule that isn't so clearly defined. Where one guy might think it's a helmet penalty, one guy might think it's not a penalty. So that's where it really comes down to is which referees are going to call it, which ones are not. It's kind of like the NBA, who's going to call fouls, who's not. You got to kind of judge it, but it's going to take a while to figure that out. And throughout this process, I think the defense really struggles because they're going to get a lot of penalties called on them. Just in a couple of games that I paid attention to this week so far, there have been quite a few penalties. It seemed like in the Hall of Fame game, they called quite a few of them. Last week, they kind of let things slide a little bit. In all the 16 games we had, but now this week it seems like they're calling more penalties again. So maybe the NFL is kind of trying to figure that out and talking to these referees over, hey, that should have been a penalty, hey, that shouldn't have been a penalty. And it's going to be a while to figure it out, but they need to get all those guys on the same page and clearly define it.
Yeah, I think what's going to – oh, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, well, I'm just going to say, guys, don't worry about it. It's not going to make that big of a deal this year. It's really not. We talk about the preseason is a time for teams to try some things out, take some chances, and just work through the kinks. That's what the refs are doing as well, and that's the thing. First of all, watch that play. It's both depressing and hilarious.
In fact, you know what? We're going to post that on our Instagram.
We are going to post that on Instagram, and we're going to cry because the refs.
And we want to hear your comments on that. You know, here's what I see happening with that rule. You know, can't hit the quarterback slow. You can't lead with your helmet. You can't hit high. I think it's confusing being a defender. You know what I see happening? A lot of missed tackles. You know what I picture? Last year, the Vikings, in that last play, Stephon Diggs, where Williams went in. What was he trying to do there? Was he trying to hit him low? I don't know. He totally whiffs on the tackle, and it turns out to be a touchdown. I see a lot of whiffs. I see a lot of arm tackles. I see it benefiting the offense. But when it comes to fantasy, it really doesn't matter.
Well, if you didn't interrupt me, no. But what I was kind of getting to was the fact that watch that play. It's hilarious. Then go on social media and look at just the outcry, just the uproar of people who were really angry about that. Fans are the ones who keep the NFL running, and the NFL is going to keep the fans happy, and the fans were not happy about that. You can bet that they're not going to be making calls like that all season long. Yeah. It'll happen every once in a while. It occasionally does happen. You get those weird, was it a catch, wasn't a catch rules, were his feet in, did he have control of the ball? There are all these, like, every once in a while it happens, it does, but we're not going to see that every week. We're not going to. And so I don't honestly think that we're going to see a noticeable difference in the way the NFL has played this year, although I'd hate to be a guy on defense right now. It seems like every year they make it tougher for defenders. If anything, it's going to be good news, but honestly, I don't know if an average fan is even going to be able to tell the difference.
Well, and that's one of the things that they changed. They changed the rules, it seems like, every year. Last year, the big uproar was with the kickoff rule. It's going to shorten the field and offensive, things like that. But realistically, at the end of the day, it didn't really change much of anything. Offenses were productive. Everybody had about the same amount of yards as they had every other year, so it didn't change a whole lot. So we'll see what comes out at the end of the season. But for the most part, that's not something that, like you both have said already, that we have to worry about in fantasy football so much.
Yeah. So let's get to it now. We should talk about injuries. Who's healthy and who's not? Okay, so I'll just ask you guys right now. First of all, like I said earlier, this was actually a pretty relaxing week. It can be very stressful when you post draft and then just hoping before the season starts that your guys don't all get hurt. This was a pretty chill week as far as not too many injuries happen, but what have we heard from recent guys who have been hurt, recovering, or just got hurt, or whatever it might be?
Yeah, I want to talk about Deshaun Watson now. He's played in 2 preseason games. The guy had, of course, the ACL injury, second in his career, one time in college. Really not much to say there other than that he looks fully recovered. He hasn't missed a beat at all. At this point, if you had any concern about drafting him, and I had some question marks about where he's at coming off that, it seems to me like he's 100% ready to go there. Any thoughts on Watson, guys?
No, exactly. He looked perfectly fine. That's not a concern for me. What about another quarterback who is a bit of a concern for me? Carson Wentz.
Carson Wentz. Any thoughts on Carson Wentz or anything you guys have heard?
Carson Wentz, I heard he's fully participating in practice, 11 on 11 drills now. Nate Sudfeld looked good in the preseason, but he had to because Nick Foles came in that game and he got hit in the shoulder while he was in his throwing motion. So he's struggling a little bit with his health. Last week he didn't even play in the preseason game because of some back and neck spasms. So it looks like they're trying to rush Carson Wentz back at this point because they don't know what's going on with Foles' shoulder. And they don't want to start the season out with Nate Sudfeld, the third string quarterback. So that's what I've heard. Carson Wentz back to practicing 11 on 11. Anything else?
Yeah, I think it bodes well, the injury for Foles. Obviously, we never want to see a guy get injured, but there's a lot of talk like, why rush Carson Wentz, your franchise quarterback, back too early, right? But now, of course, Foles being out, there's incentive to get him back there. He's in 11-11 drills. At this point, I would bet, not a lot of money, but right now, if I was a betting man, I would bet he probably will play week 1.
Yeah, I'd bet it too. I don't think it's too much of a concern. Maybe he'll miss, a week, or maybe week 1 they play a little bit cautious, but it's still Carson Wentz. He was still a guy who was on pace for 41 touchdowns last year. He's a fantastic quarterback. But I tell you what, if you're concerned, then just follow our philosophy and wait on your quarterbacks.
Yes.
And then you won't get a guy like that. No matter what league you're in, somebody will reach on Wentz past where our philosophy tells you to take him. If you're following our philosophy, you just won't have to worry about it. And so that works out really well.
And if they start him out slow too, I mean, maybe they look to the ground game and they just they change their offensive script to run the ball quite heavily in the first couple of games, just because Wentz might not be 100% to get running on that knee. So that could do well for the running backs in Philadelphia. So we'll see. We'll take it from week to week, day to day, and see where they end up week 1.
All right, so I just posted today about running back Sony Michel. Somebody asked, they said, you talked about Jeremy Hill as a kind of a deep sleeper, but you didn't even mention Sony Michel, and here's why. Right now, we don't see him having a whole lot of value. He just had surgery to remove fluid in his knee that was caused by a meniscus tear. They're saying that he is supposed to be back by week 1 practicing and playing with the team. But he hasn't played yet this preseason, and there's a good chance he doesn't play any of the 4 preseason games. We know Bill Belichick, that's going to put him in the doghouse, whether that's fair or not. It's not like he can help being hurt, but that really lowers his value. What do you guys think about his injury? Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he wasn't ready by week 1.
I think what makes this significant. If he was a veteran who'd played, been successful, not a big deal. He knows the offense, he'll be fine. But a rookie running back coming in has to understand pass protection, the complication of the playbook, playing for Bill Belichick, all that. A rookie missing time is going to inevitably hurt him the first few weeks. So I think that's got to devalue him a little bit at this point.
Absolutely, and another injury that we missed out on in New England there, Isaiah Wynn, their first round offensive lineman, drafted number 23 overall, went down with an Achilles tear. He's out for the season. So I know the type of offensive line they have there is kind of plug and play. Every time they lose a stud offensive lineman, it's like, oh no, what are the Patriots going to do now? And they always find a way to work it out. So I think they'll be fine with Isaiah Wynn going down, but that just hurts for him, for his value as a first round pick.
All right. What about a lot of people been excited about all offseason. What about Andrew Luck?
Yeah, nothing really new there compared to what we mentioned last week. He looks good. He hasn't had any setbacks. There's no pain in his shoulder. It seems like whatever that issue was, they've got it resolved. He's another one, though, that makes me a little bit concerned. But if you follow our philosophy, like you had mentioned, Christian, because of his hype, right now his average draft position is going up. He'll probably be off the board before I would take him. But right now, it looks really good for Andrew Luck. Anything you guys want to add to that?
Yeah, we won't know exactly what's going on as far as week 2 goes because that game hasn't been played yet. It'll be Monday Night Football tomorrow. But so far, he did look okay. He hasn't had any setbacks, like you said. So we'll see what happens with that. Pay attention to the preseason, like we've been saying. And I don't have anything else going on Andrew Luck.
All right. Who else do you guys want to talk about?
Buffalo Bills quarterback A.J. McCarron broke his clavicle. We were talking about this before the video. We didn't really know if he was even going to be the first or second string option there, as it was with Peterman looking good and Josh Allen being drafted so high. They really want him to play. So A.J. McCarron's going to be out for a little while. A couple other guys Jamal Williams from the Packers sprained his ankle in a play yesterday during the preseason game, so that's something to be watching out for. Jake Kumaro actually.
Let's stop for a second. Let's go back to the first one that you mentioned. You talked
Sure.
about A.J. McCarron.
Yeah, go ahead.
He's out for quite a while. It looks like with the injury, but he's a guy that if you've been following this closely, he hadn't done well in the preseason. There's a lot of talk that he was playing himself right out of a starting position, and so this is kind of to me the nail in the coffin that opens the door for the other quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So it's not like this is a guy that was a great starter. Here's the other thing though, if we're being really honest, we'll probably get to that when we break down the games. Is at this point nobody on that team for me is a viable fantasy option. So. Yeah, go ahead and start, but I want to mention that before he broke the collarbone or broke whatever that injury he had, anyways, he was a guy that was definitely trending downwards.
Yeah, Jamal Williams was the next one I talked about, the sprained ankle. How do you guys, what does that change the backfield in Green Bay, or does that change anything for you?
You know what, to me it just solidifies what we have been saying for a long, long time. And who's that, Christian?
That Aaron Jones is the guy, and that's his offense. I love it. If Aaron Jones has to miss 2 games, let's take some time from Jamal Williams too. Mm-hmm. But yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, the injury hurts a little bit. Not only that, but in 2 games, Williams was not productive. Ty Montgomery has not been productive. And so I think all that does just reinforce what we had felt going into this season, which is Aaron Jones is the guy you got to keep your eye on. So
yeah, last year, I was just listening, the Packers, they had a top 10 running back. Whoever their starting running back was last year, during the time Aaron Jones was starting, he was a top 10 running back. He went down. Jamal Williams came in. He was a top 10 running back in PPR leagues. That was last year, though. Now, this year, like you said, Jamal Williams is not looking very good so far in the preseason. And after those 2 games, I think Aaron Jones just comes in and takes over, and that's going to be his backfield to lose.
Yeah, how about another backfield that I think is also finding itself a little bit of clarification in Seattle? Here, Rashad Penny now is going to be missing time because I believe he broke his finger.
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah, and that's another one that before he broke his finger, that he was trending the wrong direction. He'd been spending time on special teams. But really the biggest concern for me, he's got the broken finger, hasn't performed great per se. But the thing that really devalues him is a guy that you've been big on lately, Christian, and that is
Chris Carson. I really like that. Chris Carson performed fantastic through the first 4 weeks of the season before getting hurt last year. Simply, in my mind, all he needs is the opportunity. And with Rashad Penny being hurt and missing time, that is more than enough opportunity for Chris Carson to show himself how good he is again this year.
Any thoughts on Penny, Ryan?
No, I don't really have anything. I mean, I mentioned last week that Pete Carroll is ever the optimist. He's always saying that everybody's doing great, but they're being really quiet on the Doug Baldwin situation. He's positive, saying 3 to 4 weeks on Rashad Penny. But if you think about it, with a broken hand, broken finger, whatever it may be, those running backs not only have to go out there and secure the ball, they also have to be able to catch the ball, and they also have to be able to block when they have to pick up pass protection. So that could really hurt his value if he's not going to be on the field because of not being able to pass protect either. That's a target for defenders now. When he's coming up and he's got his hands out trying to pass protect, they're going to see a big red target on that finger, knowing that he broke it already. So I just think that's not going to be a good sign for him. I still think later on in the season, he's somebody to stash on your bench, but for the first few weeks, Chris Carson's going to have a pretty good value.
Yeah.
Let's stay with Seattle. Let's talk about Doug Baldwin real quick. I know you're betting there, hoping, praying he does well. I know you're bigging on him, and you've got him in a keeper league. Mm-hmm. But he is banged up right now. It sounds like he's going to miss the entire preseason. Mm-hmm. Now, right away, the reports were that he's going to miss the preseason, but he'll be ready for week 1. This week, he did increase his conditioning, so that's a good sign. And he's been running sprints. That's another good sign. But like you had mentioned to me earlier in the week, running sprints is great, but what's the one concern with that?
Well, running sprints is great, but when you have a knee injury, sprints are not that bad. What really hurts your knee is the cutting, the turning in the left and the right, and that's what I'd like to see with Doug Baldwin. It honestly is starting to get to a place where it's concerning. It's not hugely concerning. I'm not going to bump him down in the rankings quite yet or anything like that. In fact, it is good news that he's increasing his conditioning, but it is at the point where if you have him, you need to be watching that. You absolutely need to keep an eye on that every week.
Well, running sprints is absolutely great. You can be the fastest receiver in the NFL, but you put something in front of somebody that's running a sprint, they're going to have to get around it somehow, and that's where the cutting comes in. Wide receivers get their separation and they get their get away from the defenders by being able to cut in certain motions. So absolutely, I agree with that. Sprints are all well and good, but it's the cutting that we're going to be concerned with. And once he starts that, we'll see how his progress is.
Can we stay on the West Coast?
Yeah, let's
So I want to talk about Matt Bryant and Jerick McKinnon, right? They're both banged up right now. One's got a shoulder injury, and then McKinnon's going to be out. Both of them are going to miss, sounds like, the rest of the preseason. Yeah. The one thing we talked about with both of those guys, we felt they had high PPR value, but they're not big backs because they handle the wear and tear of the NFL. Are they backs that could run between the tackles consistently? Now, what's happened after these injuries, the 49ers brought in Alfred Morris. And I honestly like Alfred Morris. He's a guy who's been productive. He's a big physical runner. And he's a guy, I think that depending upon the effectiveness of the other two backs, he can carve out a nice role. But once again, it has to be concerning that McKinnon and Bryant are banged up at this point. Any thoughts, guys?
Well, not only is it concerning that they're banged up, but it's concerning that the 49ers saw enough of a concern to get Morris.
Absolutely.
A guy who's been productive in the past and could very well fill that role as the solid between the tackles back. That's a guy who, deep sleeper, throw him on your bench. We talk about never have dead weight. That's a guy that is awesome to just stash and see what happens.
Speaking of dead weight, I actually posted this on Twitter the day that it happened. Jeremy McNichols was running the offense within the ones in San Francisco, not Joe Williams. So Kyle Shanahan was high on him last year, and I just don't see that they're willing to invest in him anymore because he's just not getting any time with the first team, and he's just moving down the ranks the longer the preseason goes.
All right. I think that, I don't know what do you think the full season fantasy outlook is now knowing that neither of those guys are playing this preseason?
I'm not touching them. I'm not touching anybody in San Francisco because it's too confusing. They bring in Alfred Morris. Everybody had Jerick McKinnon in the top 20, and then they started saying that Matt Breida was coming up and McKinnon started going down, and they both get injured. I'm worried about the offensive line. I don't really know what's going on there. Where in the preseason there were 6 players that got injured on San Francisco before Kyle Shanahan decided to take out his starters. He lost 6 starters in the first preseason game in the first 3 quarters of the game. First 2 quarters of the game even. And I just don't know what the situation is going to be with the offensive line. The backfield just got way more confusing with Alfred Morris' signing. And I'm not touching anybody in San Francisco.
I'll put anybody on my bench that's a running back because I think you can never have enough on your bench. They're so hard to come by and you never know. I'll draft those guys, but I would not depend. I wouldn't draft either one of those guys and depend on them as my running back 1 or 2. I even have a hard time right now depending on him as a flex player, running back 3. I'd put him on my bench, but I'm definitely devaluing those guys right now. How about you, son?
Yeah, of course, remember the Kyle Shanahan system loves to use receiving running backs, so in a PPR league they do have added value, but it's another one of those situations. Just try to avoid it if you can, but there comes a point, maybe you stash one on your bench and see. None of these guys should be a starter for you in your top 2, and honestly, I don't even like them as my 3. They're a 4 or a 5 or a 6 running back for me.
Just to add on with that, you mentioned PPR. Alfred Morris is not a very good PPR running back, so just watch out for that if you do have him in a PPR league. So.
All right, well, let's move on. What else do we have to talk about for injuries? Is there anyone else that is notable?
A couple quick ones out there I think are notable. Alshon Jeffrey, NFL's.com. Ian Rappaport reports that Alshon Jeffrey, shoulder surgery, could begin the season on the PUP list, which means he could lose 6 games. That's big news.
That's huge. You know what that does in my mind? Nelson Aguilar is huge on the rise then.
Well, and with Nelson Aguilar, there's an undisclosed lower limb injury with Nelson Aguilar as well. So I believe I also got this from NFL.com. It wasn't Ian Rappaport, but Nelson Aguilar has been having some trouble practicing too. He's got a couple of problems there. So who on that Eagles offense, if let's say Carson Wentz starts week 1, no Alshon Jeffrey, no Nelson Aguilar, besides the tight ends, who's the wide receiver that we can look to on the Eagles?
That's got to be Mike Wallace, I would imagine.
Mike Wallace,
I think that's kind of the answer. That's what I was expecting you guys to say. There's some trouble with the Eagles with all those the top 2 quarterbacks, the top 2 wide receivers all 4 being injured. So there's some trouble out there, and that Super Bowl hangover might be a real thing.
Well, you talk about how fast the NFL changes. It's funny for me because they came off that Super Bowl win. It's like, man, can anyone beat the Eagles this season? They have more depth than anywhere else. Probably the best defense in the NFL. One of the best young quarterbacks. A great backup quarterback. Just got a good running back in J.J. A nice receiving back in Coleman. They got good wideouts, good tight end. It was like, where do they have a weakness? And now it's like their two quarterbacks are gone. Their two wideouts are gone. They seem really banged up. So we'll keep watching that. Mike Wallace, one thing to note, we talk about because of this news with those two wideouts, Mike Wallace may be a week 1, week 2 plug and play. He will not be a good option all season. Do not draft him to be a whole season starter. Don't make that mistake. And so just to clarify that, but I feel like that's about all we have to cover for injuries.
Well, there's two more guys. One more guy, definitely.
I got
we always
list,
get
go ahead.
distracted.
Yeah, go ahead. I want to talk about Devontae Parker, wide receiver from Miami. Now, this is a guy taken in the first round, was supposed to be really talented. Every offseason, going to the beginning of the season, like last year, this guy was huge. The team talked about how great he looked. He's going to have a breakout year. Didn't happen. Going into this year, what's going to happen now? Of course, Jarvis Landry is gone. This year he steps up. What I find concerning is before a recent injury, right? He's now been injured. He's going to be out for the rest of the preseason. He's a guy that actually the team was kind of down on. The reports come out he wasn't doing well. He was getting smothered in coverage. He was struggling to get open in the scrimmages, and now he gets an injury. He's out the rest of preseason. Devontae Parker, for me, is not really in the top 35 even at this point.
No.
So I have a real concern with this guy.
I agree with that, and a lot of things that I've seen, Kenny Stills was already ranked higher than Devontae Parker, but now it gets more confusing. Does that open up a role for Albert Wilson and Danny Amendola when both of those guys are competing for the same job? They're both slot receivers primarily, and maybe one of those guys can move to the outside if Parker were to miss any time. And Xavier Howard, the guy that was smothering him in practice, is actually a really good corner for a not very good Miami defense. So I don't know if it was part of the fact that Xavier Howard's just a good corner, or if it was the fact that Devontae Parker just isn't as good of a wide receiver as they drafted. So we'll have to take a look at that in the future and see where he ends up. But I don't think Parker's a guy, like you said, is in the top 35. I don't even think I see him as a wide receiver 4 option. He's closer to the 5 or undraftable range for me.
Any other injuries?
Yeah, just real quick, Samaje Perine sprained his ankle for the Redskins. I don't know if that's going to have any effect. He should be back before the season starts. Looks like Rob Kelly might be their number 1 to start out. And we didn't talk about it. Saquon Barkley actually left practice right around the same time as Jerick McKinnon last year with the same type of injury. McKinnon was a calf strain, I believe they said, and Barkley was a hamstring strain. So when they say they're going to manage him accordingly, I posted this on Twitter. Those soft tissue injuries, they could nag throughout the year. We think about guys that have had injuries in the preseason before, like Corey Coleman and his hamstring. He didn't end up playing until week 6 or 7 last year. So some of these hamstring injuries for rookies especially, they don't know the NFL conditioning yet, could be a problem. I don't know. I missed the game last night. Did he play? Saquon Barkley?
No, he did not.
No.
But they knew that he wasn't going to play anyways. And honestly, he's a starting running back. They know what he can do. They've seen it. I don't know if he's going to need that much time to be prepared as long as the injury's fine.
Well, you talk about Washington to go back, because I think you just said it was Saquon Barkley. That's not a concern. Funny thing, the Redskins are kind of desperate at running back right now, or at least they feel that they are. They gave Adrian Peterson a workout the other day, and they're talking about maybe bringing him on their roster, which is a really bad sign as far as their confidence in the rest of their guys there. But just figured I'd throw that in there. I don't think that gives him any fantasy value either way, but just kind of funny how that works out.
He would kind of be a good guy to fit that situation when they have Chris Thompson for their third down and their receiving back. And Adrian Peterson, over the course of his career, has almost been infamous in his receiving game because he's not a very good guy with his hands. So that would actually fit pretty well for the type of offense that they're running out there. But then that just means that they have absolutely no confidence in the other 2 running backs on that team, Rob Kelly and Samaje Perine.
All right, so there it is on the injuries. Let's just move into our final section, guys, and talk about just some notable things to happen in the last preseason games. All right, so now let's just go through and talk about some notable preseason stats from players. I didn't do a whole lot of research on this. I thought it'd be kind of fun just to pull up the game and click and just to see all the numbers and have them right there available. Of course, I did do some research, and you always do 7 times more research than you would ever need. But this was another kind of boring. Week 2 of the preseason, week 4, they're not very interesting. Week 1 is fun because it's the first we've seen football in a long time. Week 3 is when all the starters play, but week 2 and week 4, we don't see a lot of starters in there, and just kind of bland or whatever. But there are still some things that we have to talk about. So let's just get right to it.
Yeah, let's make some quick observations. Once again, like we said before in the video, don't totally ignore the preseason, but don't overvalue it either. I think it's a great time to look at rookies or guys recover from injuries. I don't worry about if a veteran struggles. Obviously, they're going to be fine. Some observations, once again, we'll get to week 1, week 2, and especially week 4 of the preseason. It's hard to make any real observations. Week 3, like you said, is the biggest one. That's when a lot of the veterans will play or get an extended look at that point. So next week it'll be funner, I think, doing this video. But I want to get to the first game. I want to talk about Dallas and Cincinnati.
All right, so what do you got to say about that? I'll pull it up here.
So, Dak Prescott, here, don't have a whole lot of things from that game, honestly. It's been a pretty quiet week, like you had mentioned. But Dak Prescott, in 2 weeks, has played pretty well in the preseason. Now, a lot of people were down on the guy after having a very good rookie year. But people don't realize that, yeah, he had a down year last year. But even last year, he showed glimpses of being a great quarterback, okay? I think he's got all the skills to be a great NFL quarterback. Now, he did see a 20-point drop in his quarterback rating. But if you take a look at him, okay, the first 6 games last year, he had 14 touchdowns to only 4 interceptions. He was on pace for 37 touchdown passes. So I think he's a guy that's got the skills, athleticism. I think he's poised. I think he can do a lot of those sort of things. And right now in the first 2 preseason games, it looks like he's got things back on track there. In that game, you look at Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon, the first 2 weeks, hasn't run the ball effectively necessarily, although he did have a very nice touchdown, receiving touchdown in week 1. Part of that, I think, is the offensive line struggles. Last year, the offensive line was brutal. They've made some changes in the offseason, and it seems to me that offensive line and that offense has some work to do right now. Otherwise, in that game, there's really nothing special that really impacted me. So,
I guess one notable thing again, Rod Smith got a pretty good portion of carries. Looks like he's definitely, if Elliott goes down or suspended again, Rod Smith is the guy. One thing to note, again, this is where when you study fantasy, you just have to have an ability to put a lot of numbers in your brain, because this may not matter at all this season, or if it matters, it might not matter till week 12. But this performance could matter if something happens. But it was pretty boring. I know that the Bengals didn't score any points until the 3rd and the 4th quarter. That means their starters were trash and weren't able to put any points on the board until, 2nd and 3rd and 4th stringers were in. So that's another thing. I just don't like that offense very much.
Yeah, Andy Dalton didn't look good. But let's be honest, none of us had Andy Dalton ranked very high. Andy Dalton is a plug-and-play based on matchup at best anyway. So the fact that he struggled or has struggled doesn't mean a lot. They do have a new offensive coordinator. Got to give him time. Maybe that's an adjustment they're making there. I want to talk about Jacksonville, Minnesota. So Jacksonville, Minnesota game, it was a defensive battle. Nobody really stuck out in that one. Minnesota had a lot of injuries. Actually, 6 guys went and left the game injured, although none of them were starters at this point, so we should be okay. The one guy that did really impact me on there was Yeldon. Yeldon looked really good in the passing game. In fact, how many catches did he have in the passing game?
He had 5 catches for 73 yards. That was, for me, that was really impressive. Yeah. He could certainly turn out to be the 3rd down guy there.
He could be. In fact, in our videos, we said Yeldon doesn't have a whole lot of value unless Fournette gets hurt for the year. We do think that Yeldon does have some play or some value in PPR leagues. Once again, it's got to be situational. But what he showed us there is what we've been saying for a while, that Yeldon's pretty effective in the passing game.
Well, not only that, his running wasn't great. 10 carries for 39 yards is not a great 3.9 yards per carry, but compare that to Leonard Fournette, who had 8 carries for 12 yards and only 1.5 yards per carry. That is very unimpressive.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah, you look at it, Kirk Cousins struggled, but I think what's happening in a game like this is preseason. Kirk Cousins struggled.
Okay. We were talking about Jacksonville, so I thought you were still
there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now we're talking about Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I was going to say Kirk Cousins struggled, but I think what you're going to see in that game is you're playing 2 very good defenses, and both offensive coordinators in the preseason typically play it pretty vanilla. And so I think that probably contributed to the low scoring numbers and a lack of statistics in that game.
Yeah.
So
anything else in that game, or should we talk about Oakland and the Rams?
I want to talk about Oakland and the Rams. So that's another one. These 2 teams are playing each other. I think in week 1 or week 2 they actually play. And so both coaches sat basically all their starters. There's really nothing significant there that happened that would cause a fluctuation in player value. But I do want to talk about a guy in that game. A guy, and we want to do a video next week called Deep Sleepers. We've done a few. I want to do another one now. And there's a deep sleeper there that he got my attention before that game. And now after this game, he's really got my attention. I think he's starting to get the fantasy world's attention because people are beginning to talk about him. And that's Chris Warren III. Okay. No, Chris Warren's dad actually played in the NFL and had a very nice career, okay? Right now, Warren is battling for the number 3 spot there. Against the Lions in week 1, he had 13 carries for 86 yards, 6.6 yards per carry. And then what do you have this week, Christian?
Well, this week he had a great week right there. 18 carries, 110 yards on 6.1 yards per carry, and a touchdown. That was very impressive.
Yeah, and I think this is a position where this is a guy that may have some value this year and even long term. Marshawn Lynch, I think, is going to be okay this year. I think he's going to be a quality back, but he's not young anymore. You got Richard and Washington, but they're mostly specialty backs coming off third down passing situations. This is a guy that's really big and physical. He's 6'2", 246 pounds. This guy is a giant, right? He runs hard. He comes from University of Texas there, and he's a guy that's the reason why he didn't get drafted, the reason why there's a lot of attention is that the combine for running back, he ran a 4.69 40-yard dash. A lot of people thought that was too slow. But in college, he had 5.6 yards per carry, had 13 touchdowns in 3 seasons for the Longhorns. They tried to switch him from running back to tight end, and he was adamant that when I go to the NFL, I'm a running back. That's where I can play. That's where I'm gifted. So playing for Oakland, and in 2 weeks, this guy's looking really good.
Yeah, he even had a catch for 7 yards, which wasn't bad. It was only on 1 target, so he made the most of that opportunity. That's one of those deep sleepers that we talk about, just stash on your bench. I really like that.
Yeah, so that's about the only real observation there is that guy. He's become a deep sleeper. Definitely not going to expect him to be running back 1, 2, or 3, but somebody you should watch.
Exactly. So what's the next game you want to talk about?
Talk about we'll look at the Panthers and the Dolphins in that one. So Kalen Ballage sat out that game due to injury, but he's a guy who had a poor performance week 1. He got kicked out of the huddle this week by Tannehill for missing pass protection. This guy's stock is falling, so missing that game hurts for a rookie running back. I think this is a guy who's trending downwards. Drake continues to impress. I think, what did Drake do in that game there?
Well, we'll see. This isn't quite loading right now.
It's quite loading. So what I think that he had down here, as you look at as you bring up the stats, though, I want to talk about Drake quickly. We did a video this week, and it was risers or fallers. And one of the guys that we said as a riser was Kenyon Drake. And we gave a lot of information. One of the things we quoted was Gore. A lot of people that think that Gore's going to steal carries, but Gore actually came out and said, this guy's impressive. He's a phenomenal athlete. He can do it all. He's an amazing running back. So right now, Kenyon Drake's stock is, I think, soaring. I think Kalen Ballage's stock is falling real quickly there. And what stats did Drake have in that game?
Yeah, so Drake had 8 carries for 54 yards, a very good 6.8 yards per carry. That was very good and separated him. And then Blush didn't play at all.
Didn't play at all, yeah. Did he have any catches in the game?
Let me check. I don't think that he did. Yeah, he had 3 catches for 4 yards.
Not impressive yardage totals, but he had 3 catches, so that's good.
Well, you talk about it's preseason, how much does it matter? But the 3 targets, 3 catches says, A, all times they targeted him, he caught the ball, and B, they clearly want to throw him the ball.
Yeah.
And so that's good news. What about another guy, Christian McCaffrey?
Yeah, okay, so I was thinking about C.J. Anderson, right? How we said C.J. Anderson, for example, would probably take the role of Stewart last year. And before I get to McCaffrey, C.J. Anderson played in the game. I thought he did pretty well.
Yeah, 8 carries, 39 yards, 4.9 yards per carry. Not a bad day.
Yeah. Now, the real question for Christian McCaffrey has never been his ability in the passing game. This guy's got great hands, but can he run the ball? Now, they said that he put some weight on in the offseason, put on some muscle that helped him be a more effective runner. And now, once again, it is the preseason. We don't overreact, but Christian McCaffrey exploded.
5 carries for 92 yards. That's 18.4 yards per carry and a touchdown. He looked very effective in the ground game.
Yeah.
So we'll see if that continues into the season. He didn't disappear in the passing game either. 4 catches on 5 targets for 28 yards. That's pretty good too. That's what he does.
Yeah, so maybe right now, once again, it's only 2 preseason games, but he did put on some muscle in the offseason. He's running the ball well. He's a guy whose stock is on the rise currently. So
exactly. Again, we're not talking about every player from every team, just the things that are notable. We're not going to waste your time talking about some 4th stringer that didn't perform well, right? So we'll move on. What's another game we got to talk about here?
Yeah, we'll talk about Arizona, New Orleans. Drew Brees hasn't played, didn't play. Guy's going to be fine. Drew Brees is a stud. He's a great quarterback there. The quarterbacks in the game that did play that I want to talk about is Rosen and Sam Bradford. Actually, both of them moved the ball pretty well in that game. Threw the ball well, was effective. The Arizona running game was a little flat. Johnson did have a touchdown. They had some issues there. They lost their starting center. Maybe they're working that out there. But once again, Rosen and Bradford did well there. Those are both quarterbacks who I didn't have in the top 15, probably not even the top 20, quite honestly. And so those are guys I'm simply watching for the potential of Rosen, and maybe down the road, maybe they're a plug and play, a matchup play if I need a quarterback, or if you're in a league that starts 2 quarterbacks. So that's it. There is a guy though there that I do want to talk about in that game. You actually like this guy.
I was really impressed with Christian Kirk's performance. 4 catches for 49 yards and a touchdown. A real red zone threat, possession receiver sort of guy. That's how he plays. I don't think he's ever going to be a huge yardage guy, but he did that job well. 6 targets, 4 catches, 49 yards again, and a touchdown. He did it against the starters. I was impressed with him. What did you think?
Yeah, you know what? I like this guy going into the year, and I like what he's done. He had very good numbers. It looked effective, but he's starting to make a lot of noise. Players on his team, even his quarterback, Sam Bradford, are really impressed with this guy. And he's drawing comparisons to, do you know who they're comparing him to? People that follow that team closely?
Larry Fitzgerald.
No, not really.
I just guessed because he's on the team.
Yeah.
But
Odell Beckham Jr.
Wow.
Pretty good guy to be compared to.
Right.
And so I think he's definitely a guy. And I love a situation because we know Larry Fitzgerald's going to see that extra coverage. He's going to draw a lot of attention. So I think Kirk could have a really good year there. I like that guy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really all to mention from that game. Again, we don't want to talk like David Johnson didn't have a great yards per carry, but it's David Johnson. You're not going to hit the panic button.
No.
So let's just move on. Another game we're going to talk about, I believe, is Buffalo and Cleveland.
Yeah, we can talk about Giants and Lions after that. We'll talk about Buffalo and Cleveland. So you look at Peterman and Josh Allen. They both look pretty good in that game. Allen saw action with the first team, and he looked really good. Now, they're saying they want to bring him on slowly. They want to take their time, but he's starting to impress coaches. He seems like fair enough that offense a little bit. McCarron left the game with a broken collarbone, so really this is a 2-quarterback race right now. You're looking at Peterman and Josh Allen. They both look good. Peterman actually has looked good in both preseason games, so they had to start the season today. He's probably going to be their guy. But it doesn't matter for me when it comes to fantasy because none of those quarterbacks I'm going to draft anyways unless you're in 2-quarterback leagues. So that's my take on it. Carlos Hyde was brought in to be the starting running back there, and they drafted Chubb. Okay, so what to think? Well, you know what? Not just statistically. Well, first of all, give some stats about Carlos Hyde and what he did in that game.
Well, he went off 9 carries, 64 yards, and a touchdown. He played pretty good. That was pretty impressive. One thing to note, if you watch, he had one big carry that gave him a lot of yards there. He had this nice big carry, but he looked a little bit slow on it. And that's not necessarily a knock on Carlos Hyde. It's just to remember that's who Carlos Hyde is. He's not a fantastic receiving back, and he's likes to kind of pound the ball between the tackles. And so that's one thing to note. But you were continuing to say you were saying something? So.
No, I'm just saying that he looked good in that game. He ran the ball well, a nice stiff arm. Okay, he's not a speed guy, so he's not going to burn you, but I think he's a physical runner. Looked pretty good there. And then they drafted Chubb. Week 1 preseason, he looked brutal. He had 15 carries for 11 yards. Well, in this game, he rebounded very nicely, and he finished with the line. If you want to bring that up real quick there.
Yeah, I can. One thing to note, we talked about Duke Johnson's there last year. He had 80 catches, was it? He's a guy, he's going to be involved in the passing game. So for me, there's always that problem that there's just going to be kind of, I guess, running back by committee or whatever. But 11 carries for 53 yards and a touchdown, 4.8 yards per carry. Chubb looked much better.
Yeah, so that entire Browns running game actually looked pretty good there. Also in the game, a guy that was impressive was Nick O'Leary.
Yeah, in the passing game, they're receiving for the Buffalo Bills, 4 catches for 70 yards and a touchdown. There's certainly a role open for him to be a starting wide receiver.
Tight end, yeah.
Or excuse me, thank you.
Yeah.
But do you think what do you think? Do you think the offense there is really ready for him to?
Well, I'll tell you what, last year we talked about O'Leary a little bit as a tight end, and some people they like Clay. I don't like Clay personally. I think Clay is an okay, adequate tight end. O'Leary last year when they filled him for Clay while he was injured actually had some nice games and looked pretty good on offense that wasn't very good. And so I think actually Nick O'Leary has some sleeper value as a tight end. Once again, he's not a guy that's top 15 or top 20. I'm not going to say you need to go get this guy, but he's another guy that you got to have on your radar, a guy that you're going to have to watch and see how that develops.
Exactly. Just another guy there. It's not like you're going to be taking a lot of sleeper tight ends, but, watch him, especially week to week, and see what happens.
Yeah. Benjamin, that game didn't look particularly great. Corey Coleman finally saw some action, got traded to the Bills, played, had 1 target, had 1 catch. Wasn't spectacular. Although he's brand new to the team, he's still learning the playbook. He's got a few more weeks. I think he'll figure that playbook out. I think he's going to have a good year this year. So that's only my observations there. Giants, Lions, I'm not going to talk a whole lot about that game. Barkley sat out because he was injured, and Wayne Gallman looked good in his absence, but we had mentioned Wayne Gallman before, who's got PPR value, but honestly, unless Barkley gets injured long term, doesn't really have a whole lot of value there.
Theo Riddick made that Detroit Lions backfield even messier by getting 3 catches for 50 yards. Just to remind you, no matter how good you run, Theo Riddick is the receiving back and the third down guy. So
Yeah.
that doesn't add any clarity to that offense, that's for sure.
Yeah, Kerryon Johnson in that game didn't look that great. We like Kerryon Johnson, but like we said in our videos, we like him more for 2019. I think that is your dreaded. They are your dreaded, and they are prototypical running back by committee. That's an ugly situation. So
Yeah, exactly.
So what about the Jets and Redskins there? We'll talk about that. Sam Darnold and Bridgewater. Sam looked great. Let me reword that. I don't think he looked great. I think Sam Darnold looked good. I don't think he looked great, but I think he looked good. Teddy Bridgewater, man, he's performing really well. And so, if he doesn't get a chance to start, I really hope they get an opportunity. Maybe they'll trade the guy. I'd love to see this guy after what he went through to get a start there. He's looking really good. But none of them are really guys that I value that highly because I'm not a big fan of Jets quarterbacks at this point unless something drastically happens. You look, Bilal Paul played in that game because Isaiah Crowell set out because concussions. I like Isaiah Crowell, okay? Paul in that game was not impressive. And what I've been saying, I believe this, Paul's going to be that guy that's going to give relief. He's going to come off the bench, third down passing situations. I think Paul has a lot of long-term value there. I don't know how you feel about that.
No, I completely agree. This was probably the most unimpressive as far as fantasy impact. This was probably the most unimpressive preseason game. Like you said, Bridgewater looked very good. Of the two, I think Bridgewater certainly looked better, and I think he'd earned that starting role. But Sam Darnold's a guy, they put so much energy into him that they probably end up being long-term the guy. But either way, they're not going to be a fantasy quarterback for you. They're just not. So are you going to waste tons of time worrying about it? No, you've got plenty of other players to worry about.
Yeah, I mean, if they're on the bubble, if you're looking at Darnold, Bridgewater, of course you got McCollum there. But anyways, Darnold's a first-round pick. He's the future of that team. He's a franchise quarterback. And so, if he performs admirably, which he has at this point, I'm going to imagine he's going to be the starter. Even a couple weeks ago, the team said that they felt he had a 50-50 chance of being the starter week 1. He seems to be solidifying that. So Washington there. Of course, we had the injury week 1 to Darius Geis. And so here's an opportunity, and I think the opportunity we felt like is Samaje Perine is the guy that at this point I put my money on. Gets 1 carry for 30 yards, looked great, has an ankle injury. Now, thank God it's not the high ankle sprain, so that's a concern there. A guy that looked good in the passing game is Capri Bibbs.
He did. He looked very good in the passing game. He had quite a few receptions there. Let me pull that up. But again, looked very messy, that backfield did. The leading rusher was Martez Carter. Again, I don't think he's going to be have a fantastic year or whatever, but Capri Bibbs, anyways, he had 7 catches for 47 yards, which is interesting because you look at that's kind of what Chris Carson does. And does that worry you about Chris Carson's role as the receiving back?
Chris Thompson.
Chris Thompson, excuse me, because he's had value in PPR leagues.
Yeah, so I look at Bibbs, I look at Chris Thompson, and so here's my take. We did our NFC, you and I did the breakdown of all the running backs. We talked about Bibbs, and we said Bibbs hasn't been a great runner, but he has been very effective in the passing game. If Chris Thompson recovers slowly, I like Bibbs as a PPR play. But as of now, it would seem to indicate that the recovery's gone well for Chris Thompson. He hasn't had any setbacks. They're sitting him out because he's a veteran. And so as long as Chris Thompson plays, Capri Bibbs is really, in my estimation, nothing more than a backup, a guy that he's going to need a major injury there before he has value.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree with you. That's another, just like the Lions, don't touch it sort of backfield, honestly.
I want to move on to Kansas City and the Falcons there. I wish I could give you guys more breakdowns, more stats, more thoughts, more ideas, but it's been a pretty quiet week. Next week we'll have a lot more for you.
Well, we have to talk about it. We'll probably do a preseason recap video, but if we're being honest, we're just splitting hairs here and we're looking at just the fine details. Why? Because really, even one preseason game isn't enough. You have to look at the preseason as a whole. You have to look at the offseason as a whole. You have to look at previous seasons, combine numbers, what a guy goes out, gets 7 catches for 45 yards like Capri Bibbs did. Well, that's just in one game. That's not enough to really
got to break down game film, list coach information, feedback, things like that. So
yeah.
So I want to talk about Kansas City and the Falcons there. So Pat Mahomes, that's his team. Obviously, they let go of Alex Smith. Okay, they got rid of him. And so he's the guy that was drafted to be their starter there, and he's had some issues in the preseason. Some interceptions, some fumbles, some mistakes that he's made. But last game he looked better. He corrects some of those issues there. He's looking better. And what we found out, his favorite target is Hill. who was huge in that game. He had 4 catches, 87 yards, and a touchdown. Sounds to me like he's been forcing the ball into him, and so that's got to raise his value up. Mahomes, once again, did better in that game. I don't know if you want to bring his stats up there, but
yeah, he went 8 for 12, 138 yards and a touchdown.
Yeah, and I think he also had an interception there. So he got better. He's getting, he's making some improvements, but he's a long way to go before he becomes a reliable fantasy option.
Well, this week was an improvement for his play, but I was not impressed. Did you see the long touchdown he had to Tyreek Hill? He just gunned it up there in triple coverage and just hoped that Tyreek Hill could beat him. And that was honestly makes me nervous as a coach, makes me nervous as a guy watching him, because that's perfectly valued. I mean, that's perfectly fine play. He still scored the touchdown, it still worked out. But how many times in the regular season is that going to work before he just stops being a guy with a strong arm that defenses tell their safeties to watch out for, and then it doesn't work anymore? You know, honestly, I've been very unimpressed with him. I certainly could be wrong, however. But Tyreek Hill, 4 catches, 87 yards, and a touchdown reminded us again he's still the guy there. Tevin Coleman got the majority of carries, another guy who last year put on some weight before the season started and is one guy he's just waiting for a Devonta Freeman season-ending injury for him to, boom, jump into this huge role.
Yeah, he's your best handcuff out there, and he still is. He's a guy that you've got to handcuff. He's got that huge value out there. Another guy out there, rookie wide receiver Calvin Ridley found pay dirt in that game, and so he's another guy that I like, very similar to Christian Kirk there in Arizona. I like Calvin Ridley, great position there because we know Julio Jones is getting a lot of attention, and I think that he's in a great position to be successful.
Yeah, so what was that expression? Pay dirt?
Yeah.
I've never heard that before.
Pay dirt? Oh yeah.
Pay dirt.
That's the end zone.
Oh, that's
pay dirt. Yeah, you find the pay. You never heard that?
Well, I didn't play back in the Dust Bowl, so our end zones aren't dirt; they're grass.
Pay dirt,
but
so.
What's the next game? Anybody else you want to talk about as we roll through?
Eagles Patriots. Let's talk about that. Okay, first of all, Tom Brady, is he too old? Is he not? Is he this? We did a video a while back where we broke down in depth Tom Brady, his stats, his numbers, how he takes care of his health, even his diet, his exercise, and we basically came out to say that we think this guy's going to have at least one more really good year, and we're going to take a year at a time. But we felt good. But he's a guy that's going to be slowed by age. He came out, he didn't miss a beat. If you want to give his breakdown there, how he did, he just methodically picked apart that defense. Once again, it is preseason, and I'm sure they weren't blitzing a bunch, but, it showed me that I think he's going to be just fine. What's that numbers he put up?
Yeah, 19 completions, 172 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks, a rating of 116.2. Very impressive. No concerns there. You know what the Patriots did? They reminded me Brandon Bolden is still a running back for there. I don't think he has any fantasy value, but I just had to laugh. He's been there, it feels like, for so long.
He has, yeah. Probably the biggest information there I was thinking of. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you go somewhere else?
No, you go right ahead.
Nick Foles. Nick Foles, a lot of people thought maybe he could start the year. They would take their time getting Carson Wentz back into play. He got hurt. He struggled. That's changing. I think the timetable now, Carson Wentz has begun to play in 11-on-11 drills there, so Foles being hurt a little bit.
Here's a real deep sleeper, not a guy I'm going to tell you to draft. Please do not draft him or overvalue what I'm saying, but Sheldon Gibson, 5 catches for 90 yards and a touchdown on 6 targets. He looked impressive.
Yeah.
I was impressed by that. And then I was very surprised how much the Patriots were using Cordell Patterson. He's a guy who they said in his last year with the Vikings that he was starting to refine himself. And then New England takes him down. He had 4 catches, 51 yards, and a touchdown. He also looks impressive in an offense that needs a wideout to step up.
Yeah, he might have added value to if you can play a league that you also get points for kick returns, because this guy, the one thing with Cordell Patterson is it's not a matter of talent or speed. This guy's very talented. The reason why he struggles as a wide receiver, he's not very refined, doesn't run great routes there. So if he can make any improvement there, plus the first 4 weeks when Julian Edelman's out, that might be a huge boost for him.
Yeah.
You look in that same game, and you've talked about him a lot there. Of course, you've got some injuries. Sony Michel's out and whatnot. Mike Gillislee struggled there. Another guy for back-to-back weeks now that looked pretty good is Jeremy Hill.
Yeah.
Jeremy Hill had another good game there. Once again, it is preseason, but you know what? Before you can have a journey of 1 mile, you got to take one step. And so far, that first step is a good preseason. And what do you do in that game?
He had 6 carries for 31 yards. So that's a pretty solid 5.2 yards per carry. That's really nice to look at and see. And then just checking to make sure he didn't have anything in the passing game, and sure enough, he didn't. But he seems to be that. He seems like he could be that solid runner all season long. Another game with solid yards per carry is what we're looking for there.
Yeah, a lot of people ask, well, what about Rex Burkhead? What about White? What is Sony Michel? Don't they devalue a guy like Hill? And what I would think is going to happen there, what I think they wanted to do last year with Mike Gillislee, is they wanted him to have the role that LeGarrette Blount had, which is a big physical back to run the ball between the tackles, get the goal line carries, which Mike Gillisley did the first few weeks, but then he had struggles. He was ineffective, fumbled, things like that, got in the doghouse of Bill Belichick. And so you look at White, you look at Rex Burkett, I think those are guys that are going to have their role in the passing game, but they're still looking for that big physical running back, and I think Jeremy Hill could take that role. Another guy out there that's looked good. Now he's not going to take the spot for Zach Ertz, but he's a rookie tight end that come out of college, was highly touted in back-to-back weeks, done really good. You want to look up Dallas on there and see what he did.
Yeah.
So I'm going back and forth, having you check out all these stats. I'm keeping you kind of busy there. So
Yeah, this is why we need support from you guys. This computer's trash, and it takes like 5 minutes to load things. It was one of those situations I didn't want to waste time copying and pasting information onto a document and printing it when I can just pull it up on my computer here, but maybe I should have. That might have been a mistake. But Dallas Goedert, he had 3 catches for 57 yards again. He looks very good.
He does. He had a good preseason one. I think the other thing too is that they've run a lot of two tight end sets, and so it looks like that's a formation they use quite a bit. So they might have both had value. They might go back to you think about Aaron Hernandez and Gronkowski. Those guys are both productive on the same team. Let's get to unless you have anything more to say on that. Anything you want to add?
Absolutely not. I think we said all of it.
Let's go to the Steelers-Packers. Jamal Williams had 2 carries for 2 yards. Ty Montgomery didn't look very good there. There's some injuries. And it just reinforces what we've been saying the whole time, which is Aaron Jones is your guy. Everything seems to be indicating that. Now he's got a 2-game suspension, but Williams hasn't looked great. Now, obviously, those guys are going to get carried the first 2 weeks. They're going to have to get that. It hasn't been that impressive there. So
Yeah, that's for sure. What about a Packer who has been impressive, Jake Kummerow?
He's a deep sleeper. This guy, he's got a long ways to go before he's a viable fantasy starter, but this guy's getting more and more of attention.
He's a big playmaker. He had 3 catches for 114 yards and a touchdown.
Yeah.
When you talk about he could be the wide receiver 3 behind Adams and Randall Cobb, there could certainly be a big role for him as kind of the deep route guy, as a big playmaker.
Yeah, and week 1 of the preseason, he had 3 catches, 76 yards, and a TD. Aaron Rodgers early in this year was mad at the young wide receivers in practice, came out publicly and basically lambasted them. But the one guy that he didn't, the guy that he actually praised, was Jake Kummerow. He really likes him. So everything's trending well. He's performing on the field. Aaron Rodgers likes him. The coaching staff likes him. He did injure his shoulder because he did a somersault, I believe, and hurt his shoulder on that. But otherwise, this guy's looking really good. Another one, Jimmy Graham hooked up with Aaron Rodgers. Could be a sign of things to come. I do like Jimmy Graham, a big physical body. I think a lot of touchdowns this year, although I do think he's got lower PPR value. James Washington had a huge game there. But for me, with Juju Smith-Schuster, who, by the way, has looked really good in the preseason. You look at Bell Brown. I think that's a guy that's more dynasty, somebody that you can only really keep an eye on for injuries. Not too much more to say in that game. There's a lot of points scored there. I think that Steelers defense has a lot of work to do. If you look at the second half of last year, they were brutal. Second half of last year, last 10 games, they were averaging about 20 or allowing 28 points per game. And in the preseason right now, they're not looking good.
Well, yeah, you give up 33 points in the first half. That's just ugly.
Yeah, it is ugly. So we'll talk about the Bears and the Broncos. And so a guy that you like there, a running back on that team that you're big on for the Broncos is?
Royce Freeman.
Royce Freeman. Didn't have a huge game per se, but he did get in the end zone. I'd say pay dirt again. That'll confuse you. He did get a touchdown in that game there. He looks to be the number 1 guy. I think he's got that spot. Unless something drastically goes wrong at this point, I suspect he's going to be the running back, get a majority of the carries there. I like him.
Had 1 target, 1 catch for 6 yards as well. That's good news.
Yeah. Now, Chicago, they struggled last year. I've talked about it a little bit. I'm almost afraid to say things because whenever I talk bad about the Bears or even question a few things, I tend to get pushback from Bears fans there. But that offense hasn't looked great. Mitch Trubisky hasn't looked great per se, but he did have a touchdown. And it seems like he's got rapport with one player that a lot of people have talked about. I know Ryan has talked about it a little bit as being a sleeper tight end, and that is Trey Burton. And what do you do in that game?
Yeah, Trey Burton on 5 targets had 4 catches for 45 yards and a touchdown. He certainly looked impressive. In fact, for me, he was really the silver lining of that unimpressive offense, which both quarterbacks combined for just 6.6 yards average per attempt. In that running game, 2.4 yards per carry. That was bad, but Burton definitely shined a little bit.
Yeah, you look at that, Anthony Miller, another wide receiver there. That's rookie wide receiver for Chicago. Looked good in that game. Made a pretty nice performance. It's been getting a lot of positive attention from coaches.
Yeah.
One guy on there that Did not look well week 1. He looked better week 2, but not that impressive. That's Case Keenum. And what's his final line in that game?
Yeah, exactly. So Case Keenum went 8 for 13, 78 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions.
Yeah, the concern I have with Case Keenum, if you look at before last year, Case Keenum hasn't been a good quarterback at all. Last year had a very good year, but I think a lot of that was Coach Sherman. Coach Sherman has done wonders with other quarterbacks. You look what he did for Nick Foles and stuff and some other quarterbacks. So I'm starting to think more and more that Case Keenum's production could have been a product of the right system with the right coach. We'll see, but right now that offense is struggling a little bit with Case at the helm.
Yeah, that was absolutely a huge loss. Vikings made a ton of offseason additions, but I honestly am more concerned this year than I was, with the talent last year, just having lost Sherman as one of the best coaches in the NFL, able to get offenses off the ground, and he was able to work with broken offensive line, broken quarterback situation, injured running back, and so that's a huge loss. But yeah, we'll see. I'm not a big fan of Case Keenum this season.
Yeah, at this point, I do have my concerns. So, talk about the Chargers Seahawks. I don't know what you thought in there. I didn't see a whole lot. One thing that impacted me once again, Penny's out. Chris Carson got the carries. Didn't have a great year, but a great game, I should say. But he was decent. I think right now he's going to be the starting running back week 1 for Seattle. That's the only real observation there. The other thing is Baldwin sat out. Here's what I did notice. Baldwin sat out. They don't have a lot of talent at wide receiver. But you know what? You know who had good numbers in limited time? Russell Wilson.
He did.
And what was his numbers there?
Yeah, so you went 13 for 21, 193 yards, no picks.
Yeah, I think through one quarter there, he had about 150 yards. So just a reminder that he's such a talented quarterback. I think he's going to be fine there. Talk about the Broncos and the Titans. The Buccaneers and the Titans. Thank you.
Winston played pretty good, 226 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk that because he's suspended, he's going to have to come back and earn his position back again. I think sometimes that's just rhetoric, trying to scare the guy, make him focus, get his attention. He's the best quarterback on that team. He looks sharp. Undoubtedly, when his suspension is done, he's going to be the starting quarterback there. You also had Chris Godwin in that. We like Chris Godwin. His stock is rising also. Marcus Mariota has been looking good. Now, he's a guy the first 2 years looked good. He was trending upwards last year, had a major fall off. But it would appear that he's back on track. He's been looking sharp in preseason there.
Yeah, hey, what about a wide receiver, Tywan Taylor?
Yes.
Wow, he looked good, man. So he went out, had 4 catches for 95 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's a guy who, at the very beginning of this offseason, it was like January, February, March, where it came up, he could be a good sleeper. And honestly, I didn't buy it. But as time goes on and on and on, I like him more and more. And this week really solidified him in my mind as a guy who's worth a shot.
Yeah, he took a screen pass about, 45, 50 yards for a touchdown. He looked quick. He's a guy definitely to keep an eye on. He's not a wide receiver 1, 2, or 3. We're not saying that he's a sleeper. He's definitely somebody you got to put on your bench there. So I want to get to some of the running backs there. There was one guy that a lot of people thought this is his breakout year. We get a number of breakdowns statistically. Told you concerns we had, performance issues we had. And that guy on the Titans that we warned everybody to stay away from, or don't overvalue him, is
Derrick Henry.
Derrick Henry. Now, I hate to say this. I felt like a broken record. I know it is just the preseason, but he has not looked explosive. He hasn't looked good, and this game reinforces that. The limited carries that he had was what were his carries and what was his yards there?
Yeah, so first off, he was ineffective in the first game. This isn't just a one-game thing. He's also struggled in this game as well. But another thing that's struggling is the internet, which is now down. So that's great.
So, well, anyways, going back to where he's at, I think he had a few carries. His yards per carry was like 3.5, 3.6, something in that area. Just once again, 2 games in a row where he hasn't performed very well. Reinforcing that I think Deion Lewis is going to carve out a significant role there, devaluing Derrick Henry. Another guy there that in back-to-back week has looked well, and it's a true opportunity, is you look at Peyton Barber. He was solid again. He had 6 carries, 23 yards, 5.3 yards per carry. And the guy there's kind of position battle. People are huge on him coming out of college is Ronnie Jones Jr. And so you look at him in the first week, didn't do well. This week he didn't do well at all. In fact, Jones, if you want to bring up his line real quick there.
Yeah.
In week 1, if I remember correctly, I don't have my stats with me, but week 1, I believe he ended some like 8 carries for 9 yards. That's what he had, Jones, the first game. In this game, he had.
So this game, Ronald Jones had 4 carries for 2 yards. It's very impressive compared to Peyton Barber's. He had 6 carries for 32 yards, so there's a huge gap. You have 0.5 yards per carry versus 5.3 yards per carry.
Yeah, so right now Peyton Barber appears to be taking over that role. He's a more big physical back. One of the things that we said about Jones, the concerns we had, is a smaller back we thought could have value in the passing game, but could he be that running back to get all those carries? Could he get 15, 20, 25 carries between the tackles? We didn't think that he could. Now his performance in the preseason just continues to add concerns that we have for him, and it continues to increase the value of Peyton Barber, who I didn't, by the way, is a great running back, but he certainly might be a nice option for you guys out there.
Yeah, I like Jonnu Smith, had 1 catch for 16 yards. I don't see him having too much value this year, but in the future, as Delaney Walker continues to get older, he could definitely work his way in to be a solid starting and possibly good fantasy tight end.
Yeah. Final game, you want to bring that up. Let's talk about the 49ers and the Texans. That'll be kind of our recap once again. Not a whole lot to say. I don't want to feel the need to just give you information, so I start to dig for something that's simply not there. Not a lot has happened necessarily that's significant this week. But in that game, 49ers, Texans, we talked about it earlier. Deshaun Watson is fully healthy. This guy looks great. He's got no concerns there. You can fully trust that he's healed. The other one is Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo looked pretty good in that game. And there's been a lot of talk that Jimmy Garoppolo has got a real chemistry. He's really connecting with Goodwin there. And I think that was reinforced in the game. I think Goodwin had some good numbers.
Yeah, he did. So we look at Jimmy Garoppolo, went 10 for 12, 136, 1 touchdown. He did have an interception, but, well, that happened. Anyways, Goodwin had 3 targets. 3 catches, 63 yards.
Yeah, and the one interception that Garoppolo threw, it was through a wide receiver's hands. It should have been caught.
Yeah, it definitely should have been caught. That's what the funny thing was, is Garoppolo had a good day, threw for 136 yards. Essentially, half of his yards went to Marquise Goodwin. You talk about chemistry, that's it right there. Went 3 for 3. That's really good. It's really hard to measure quarterback wide receiver chemistry just looking at the numbers, but one way you can do that is by looking at their completion percentage. You can see a talented quarterback and a talented wide receiver, sometimes incomplete passes if they're not on the right page, but if they're on the right page, the quarterback knows when to and when to not throw it to him, and that 3 for 3, 3 targets, 3 catches for me is huge. And then, of course, he got downfield very effectively and had 61 yards.
Okay, so those are the games. So some thoughts that we have there. Not a lot of significant changes at this point. If you have any questions for us, concerns, thoughts, whatever, subscribe, share. Also, we are running a couple of leagues, 16-team leagues. If you want to play against us, you can do that. We only have a couple of openings, but if you're interested, let us know. We'll try to get you in there. You need to give us your email address. Don't give it to us if we've already put you on there, if you already if we've already been connected or accepted that.
Exactly. That's just what I was going to say. If you've already accepted or left us your email, you don't need to do that. But if you haven't, definitely leave something down below. Give us your email if you want to join a league with us. As always, we thank you guys so much for being here. Let us know what you think. Let us know your thoughts. You guys have a great day, and God bless.